The fires of Cadia had died 10,000 years ago, yet their smoke still drifted through the immaterium, carrying whispers of prophecy and dread. On the forge world of Metallica Prime, beneath the crimson sky where twin suns bled light through the industrial haze, Magos Dominus Varek 91 paused in his sacred calculations. The machine spirit of his cogitator had begun chanting in Binharic cant, speaking of a convergence point in the warp currents that defied all logic. The equations spoke of an arrival, a presence vast and alien sliding through the screaming void between stars like a titan's fist through silk. The prophet serfs had spoken of the mad titan in hushed tones for millennia. They called him the Balancer, the Purple Death, the one who would stride across galaxies to winnow the chaff from the wheat. Their scribblings in the Underhive archives spoke of a gauntlet bearing 6 gems of unthinkable power, each one a collapsed star's dying scream given form. The Eldar Farseers had named him in their death songs as the Twice Cursed, the one whose shadow would fall across even the throne of terror. Yet none had believed the ravings of madmen and Xenos until the day the sky above Metallica Prime split like rotted flesh. The tear in reality yawned 20 kilometers wide, bleeding purple fire and the screams of tortured space. From that wound stepped Thanos of Titan, his golden armor gleaming with the reflected light of dying stars. Upon his left hand sat the Infinity Gauntlet, its 6 stones flickering with power that made the warp itself recoil in recognition. The Reality Stone pulsed crimson, the Power Stone blazed violet, and the others hummed with energies that had once commanded entire universes. Yet here, in this realm where gods bled and sanity was a luxury, the stone's light wavered like candle flames in a hurricane. The first to die were the orbital defense platforms. Thanos raised his gauntlet fist and the space stone flared azure. Reality folded, compressed, and the massive defense satellites simply ceased to exist in their current coordinates, appearing instead as twisted metal rain across the planet's northern continent. The Mechanicus fleet tried to respond, their ancient Nova-class frigates powering void shields and cycling plasma batteries through their blessed ignition rites. Admiral Captain Morvac bellowed orders from the bridge of the Omnissiah's will, his augmetic jaw clicking as he processed targeting solutions. All batteries, concentrated fire on target designation Xenos Alpha. Morvac commanded, his voice carrying across the Vox channels with the weight of 100 void battles. Machine spirits of our weapons, hear our prayers and guide your fury true. The Imperial fleet unleashed a storm of las cannon fire and plasma torpedoes that could have cracked a moon. The beams converged on Thanos' position with mathematical precision, each shot calibrated to arrive simultaneously in a killing pattern that left no escape vector. Yet the Titan simply closed his fist. The Power Stone erupted with violet radiance, and every energy beam, every torpedo, every drop of directed violence simply stopped in the void, held motionless by will made manifest. Thanos opened his hand and the weapons turned, their killing light now aimed at the ships that had fired them. The Omnissiah's will died first, its plasma reactors overloading as its own torpedoes punched through weakened void shields. The frigate Ferrous Dawn lasted 3 seconds longer before a las cannon blast meant for another target carved through its bridge. In the span of a heartbeat, 12 ships became expanding clouds of superheated vapor and screaming metal. The Titan descended toward Metallica Prime like a falling star, his form wreathed in the purple fire of the Power Stone. The world's defense grid awakened with the grinding roar of ancient machinery, macro cannons the size of city blocks swiveling on their massive mounts. Each weapon was a relic of the dark age of technology, blessed by 10,000 years of ritual and maintenance, their machine spirits hungry for the blood of the Emperor's enemies. Magos Dominus Varek 91 stood in the primary command sanctum, his dozen mechadendrite appendages interfacing with control systems as streams of data flowed through his augmetic consciousness. The sacred calculations were clear, the firing solutions perfect, the blessing of the Omnissiah upon their weapons. Yet as Thanos landed in the center of Manufactorum District 7, walking through the storm of defensive fire as though it were summer rain, Varek 91 felt something he had not experienced in 3 centuries of service: doubt. The Titan's first steps across the industrial wasteland left craters in reinforced ferrocrete. His mere presence seemed to warp reality around him, causing the local gravitic field to fluctuate and sending ripples through the electromagnetic spectrum that made Auspex displays scream with ghost readings. Workers fled in panic, their screams lost beneath the thunder of collapsing hab blocks as Thanos carved his path toward the planetary capital. A squadron of Lehman Russ battle tanks emerged from the smoke, their hulls painted in the crimson and steel of the Metallica Planetary Defense Force. The lead tank, Emperor's Hammer, fired its battle cannon at point-blank range, the shell a blessed piece of Imperial ordnance that had tasted the blood of orcs and traitors across a dozen campaigns. The projectile struck Thanos' center mass and simply bounced away, its momentum absorbed by the shimmering field of the Reality Stone. The Titan reached out with his left hand and closed his fingers. The tanks began to crumple like paper sculptures, their blessed armor plating flowing like liquid as reality bent to accommodate a new truth. The crews died instantly, their bodies compressed to atoms as matter itself betrayed the laws that had governed it since the birth of the galaxy. In seconds, 12 war machines became abstract sculptures of twisted metal and crystallized pain. From the command bunker beneath the Capitol spire, Governor Militant Castor watched the slaughter through pict feeds that flickered with static. His augmetic eye whirred as it adjusted focus, trying to comprehend the scale of destruction unfolding across his world. Behind him, Commissar Vex stood at rigid attention, her bolt pistol drawn, though she knew it would be useless against such a foe. "Vox the Inquisition," Castor commanded, his voice steady despite the tremor in his organic hand. "Tell them the twice cursed has come. Tell them Metallica Prime is lost." The message raced through the astropathic network, carried by the screams of psychers whose minds burned as they touched the warp. On distant Ophelia VII, Inquisitor Lord Vane received the transmission as he knelt in prayer before a shrine to the Emperor. The golden Aquila seemed to flicker in the candlelight, its eyes filled with reflected sorrow as the old Inquisitor read the words that spelled doom for an entire world. Thanos walked through the ruins of Metallica Prime's outer defenses like a god among mortals, his every step calculated and purposeful. He had come to this galaxy with a vision, a dream of balance that would transform the endless cycle of war and suffering into something clean and simple. Half of all life would die, chosen at random without regard for rank or species or creed. The survivors would inherit a galaxy with resources enough for all, their children growing strong in the shadow of his benevolence. Yet as he studied the industrial wasteland before him, breathing air thick with the smoke of 10,000 years of endless production, Thanos felt the first stirring of disgust. This was not a civilization worth saving, not a species that had learned the value of restraint. These humans bred like vermin across 1,000,000 worlds, consuming and destroying with no thought for tomorrow. They had turned their galaxy into a charnel house where brother fought brother while darker things stirred in the spaces between stars. Perhaps random selection was too merciful. Perhaps this universe required a more thorough cleansing. The thought came unbidden, carrying with it a satisfaction that tasted of copper and ash. In the back of his mind, something vast and hungry stirred in approval. The warp pressed close around him, its whispers promising power beyond imagining if only he would embrace the beauty of absolute destruction. Thanos pushed the voices away with an effort of will, but their echoes lingered like poison in his thoughts. A new sound reached his ears, the distinctive whine of plasma coils charging to firing capacity. From behind the rubble of a collapsed hab complex stepped a figure in ceramite and adamantium, his power armor painted in the midnight blue of the Ultramarines. Brother Sergeant Kaltos held his plasma pistol steady, its barrel glowing with barely contained stellar fire, while his free hand gripped a chainsword that had tasted the blood of traitors and Xenos across 3 centuries of war. "In the name of the Emperor and the 13th Legion, I order you to surrender," Kaltos declared, his voice carrying clearly through his Vox grill despite the chaos surrounding them. "You will face Imperial justice for the lives you have taken." Thanos regarded the Space Marine with something approaching curiosity. Here was a warrior bred for war, his genetic code rewritten to create the perfect soldier. Yet the Astartes stood alone against impossible odds, his duty compelling him forward even when logic screamed retreat. It was admirable in its futility, like a single candle flame defying the darkness of space. "Your emperor is a corpse upon a throne of lies," Thanos replied, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "I offer this galaxy salvation through suffering, balance through loss. Your species has had 10,000 years to learn restraint. Instead, you chose endless war." Kaltos fired without another word, his plasma bolt searing through the air with the fury of a caged star. The shot took Thanos in the chest, its superheated matter designed to burn through even daemon flesh. Yet the reality stone pulsed, and the plasma simply ceased to exist, its molecules scattered across dimensions where mathematics held no meaning. The Titan moved faster than human eyes could follow, crossing 30 meters in a single bound. His massive fist caught Kaltos in the chest, the impact driving the Astartes through 3 hab-block walls before the Space Marine's momentum finally died. Thanos followed at a leisurely pace, finding the warrior buried beneath tons of ferrocrete and twisted metal, his armor cracked but his spirit unbroken. "Impressive," Thanos mused, reaching down to lift the struggling Space Marine by his helmet. "Your kind are bred for war, yet you cling to concepts of honor and duty. Tell me, warrior, how many worlds have you seen burn in service to your corpse god?" Kaltos spat blood onto his attacker's golden armor. "Every world I helped burn deserved its fate. Every traitor, every Xenos, every daemon I killed brought the galaxy one step closer to peace." "You understand nothing of duty. I understand everything," Thanos replied. "I have walked the breadth of the universe, seen civilizations rise and fall like waves against the shore. Each believed themselves chosen, special, deserving of survival while others perished. Your Imperium is no different. 1,000,000 worlds ground down to feed the endless hunger of war." The Power Stone flared, and Kaltos screamed as his consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of flesh and bone. For an instant that lasted eternity, the Space Marine saw the galaxy through Thanos' eyes, witnessed the endless cycle of war and death that stretched from the birth of stars to their final dying light. He saw children born into slavery on Forge worlds, their lives consumed to feed the war machine. He saw entire species exterminated for the crime of existing in the Imperium's path. He saw the Emperor himself, a broken god feeding on the souls of psychers while his realm crumbled around him. "You see it now," Thanos whispered as Kaltos sagged in his grip. "The truth your masters hide behind pretty lies about duty and honor. This galaxy is diseased, and I am the cure." The Space Marine's hand moved with desperate speed, drawing a cracked grenade from his belt and priming it in a single motion. The explosive device beeped once before detonating against Thanos' chest, its fury contained within the reality-warping field of the Infinity Stones. Brother Sergeant Kaltos died in the explosion, his gene seed lost forever, his name added to the endless rolls of the honored dead. Yet his sacrifice bought something precious: time. The astropathic message burst from Metallica Prime like a dying star, carrying with it the psychic imprint of a Space Marine's final moments. Across the galaxy, Chapter Masters and Inquisitor Lords felt the echo of Kaltos' sacrifice, his memories of the Titan searing through the warp to reach those who might stand against the coming darkness. On Macragge, Chapter Master Marneus Calgar felt the death of one of his sons like a knife to the heart. On Terra, the High Lords of the Imperium stirred in their council chambers, their political games forgotten in the face of a new and terrible threat. Lord Commander Robut Gilliman stood in his private chambers aboard the fortress monastery of Hera's Honor, studying tactical displays that showed Imperial losses across a dozen sectors. The return of his traitorous brothers had stretched the Imperium's forces to breaking point, while new threats emerged from the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge. Now this, a being of immense power whose very presence warped reality around him, the Primarch's analytical mind raced through possibilities, contingencies, strategies that might stem the tide of destruction. "My lord," came the voice of Captain Sicarius through the Vox. The Inquisition requests immediate conference. They claim this tangent entity represents an extinction-level threat to the Imperium. Patch them through, Guilliman commanded, his gauntleted fingers drumming against the steel of his desk. On the hollow projector before him, the image of Inquisitor Lord Vane materialized, the old man's face lined with worry and the weight of terrible knowledge. Lord Commander, the situation on Metallica Prime has deteriorated beyond all recovery. Vane began without preamble. The entity calling itself Thanos has demonstrated reality-warping capabilities that surpass even the most powerful Daemon princes. Our preliminary assessments suggest he wields artifacts of Xenos origin, each containing power equivalent to stellar collapse events. Recommendations? Guilliman asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Exterminatus, Vane replied without hesitation. Cyclonic torpedoes, virus bombs, whatever it takes to ensure this threat cannot spread beyond a single world. The risk to the Imperium is too great for half measures. The Primarch was quiet for long moments, weighing the lives of billions against the safety of trillions more. It was a calculation he had made countless times during the Great Crusade, the bitter mathematics of warfare writ large across the stars. Yet something in Brother Sergeant Kaltos's final transmission gave him pause, a sense that conventional weapons would prove as ineffective as everything else thrown against this Titan. Negative, Guilliman said finally. If our enemy can reshape reality at will, orbital bombardment may prove useless. We need more intelligence before committing to irreversible action. I'm deploying the second company to establish a reconnaissance perimeter around Metallica Prime. They are not to engage unless absolutely necessary. Vane's expression hardened. My lord, with respect, this is not a decision for conventional military doctrine. The Inquisition has protocols for exactly this type of threat. The Inquisition has protocols for burning worlds, Inquisitor, Guilliman replied, steel entering his voice. I have protocols for winning wars. This Thanos will be stopped, but not through blind destruction. We will study him, learn his weaknesses, and then we will kill him. Is that understood? The hologram flickered and died, leaving the Primarch alone with his thoughts and the weight of command. Outside the viewport, the void between stars seemed darker than usual, as though something vast and hungry was stirring in the depths of space. Guilliman reached for his sword, the Emperor's gift humming with psychic energy as his fingers closed around its hilt. Whatever this Titan's goals, whatever power he wielded, he would learn that the sons of the Emperor did not yield easily to despair. On Metallica Prime, Thanos stood among the ruins of the planetary capital, his gauntleted hand raised toward the smoke-stained sky. The Mind Stone pulsed with golden light as he reached out with his consciousness, touching the thoughts of every living being on the world below. He felt their terror, their anger, their desperate hope that someone would come to save them. It was pathetic and beautiful in equal measure, the final gasps of a species too stupid to recognize salvation when it stood before them. The local planetary defense force had barricaded themselves in the lower levels of Hive Metallicus, their las guns and autocannons arranged in killing fields that would slaughter any conventional army. They prayed to their corpse god and whispered the names of saints, as though faith could turn aside the will of one who had wrestled with cosmic abstracts and won. Their belief was touching in its futility. Thanos closed his fist, and the Hive City began to sink into the earth. The Reality Stone rewrote the fundamental properties of ferrocrete and plasteel, transforming solid matter into something approaching liquid. Hab blocks flowed like water, carrying screaming civilians down into crushing darkness as the city folded in upon itself. In minutes, a population center that had housed 50 million souls became a perfectly circular crater, its edges smooth as glass. The survivors huddled in the ruins beyond the crater's edge, their minds shattered by the casual display of omnipotence. Some wept, others prayed, a few simply stared at the geometric perfection of their city's grave. Thanos walked among them like a shepherd among his flock, his expression serene as he prepared to complete his work. "Citizens of the Imperium," he announced, his voice carrying across the wasteland with unnatural clarity. "You have lived your lives in service to a lie, bleeding for masters who see you as nothing more than ammunition in their endless wars. I offer you something different. I offer you peace." The space stone flared, and suddenly half the survivors simply weren't there anymore. Not dead, not vaporized, simply gone as though they had never existed at all. The remaining millions stared in horror at the empty spaces where their loved ones had stood, their minds struggling to process the implications of such power. "The balance is restored," Thanos continued, his voice carrying no trace of emotion. "Those who remain will rebuild, will learn the value of restraint. Your children will inherit a world with resources enough for all. This is my gift to you." A small girl stepped forward from the crowd, her face streaked with tears and soot. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, yet her eyes held a determination that spoke of imperial conditioning begun in the womb. In her tiny hand, she clutched a las pistol nearly as large as her torso, its charge pack flickering with the last dregs of power. "You killed my mama," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "You killed Papa and Grandmere and everyone I love. The Emperor protects, but you're just a monster." She raised the pistol with both hands and fired. The last beam struck Thanos in the chest and dissipated against his armor like candlelight against a void shield. The Titan looked down at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across his features. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before, almost gentle. "Child, your family's sacrifice ensured your survival. They died so that you might live in a galaxy free from the endless hunger that has consumed your species. In time, you will understand." The girl fired again and again until the charge pack finally died with a pathetic whine. Then she threw the weapon at Thanos' feet and screamed, a sound of such pure anguish that even the Titan seemed to flinch. Behind them, the other survivors began to keen, their voices joining in a chorus of grief that echoed across the ruined world. The time stone pulsed on Thanos' gauntlet, showing him glimpses of possible futures. He saw the girl growing up in the ruins, her heart hardened by loss until she became something fierce and terrible. He saw her leading armies against his followers, her hatred burning like a star across the galaxy. He saw her dying on a dozen different worlds, her last words always the same condemnation. In every timeline, in every possibility, her eyes held the same accusation: monster. For the first time since arriving in this benighted galaxy, Thanos felt something approaching doubt. He had culled civilizations across the breadth of the universe, each action justified by cold logic and mathematical certainty. The needs of the many outweighed the suffering of the few. Balance required sacrifice. Order demanded chaos be pruned back with an unforgiving hand. Yet this child's pain felt different somehow, more real than the statistical abstractions he usually dealt with. Perhaps it was the influence of this galaxy's psychic medium, the way emotion and belief could reshape reality through the warp's chaotic currents. Perhaps it was simply the recognition that even gods could be wrong. The moment passed. Thanos turned his back on the girl and began walking toward the horizon, where new cities waited to feel his touch. Behind him, the survivors began the grim work of burying their dead, their voices raised in prayers that fell upon deaf ears. Above them, the sky began to weep, crimson rain falling like tears from the wounded heavens. In the depths of space, sensors aboard Imperial Navy vessels recorded the first stirrings of a new threat. The warp currents around Metallica Prime had begun to shift and eddy, as though something vast was swimming just beneath the surface of reality. Astropaths reported dreams of purple fire and golden gauntlets, their screams echoing through the ship's corridors as they tried to interpret visions that drove lesser minds to madness. Captain Thaddeus Cant stood on the bridge of the strike cruiser Sword of Retribution, watching the tactical display with growing unease. His ship was part of a reconnaissance fleet dispatched by Lord Commander Guilliman, their orders to observe and report rather than engage. Yet as he watched the energy readings from Metallica Prime's surface spike beyond all reasonable parameters, Kant felt the familiar weight of impossible choices settling on his shoulders. "Captain," called out his master of Vox, Sergeant Holst, "we're receiving scattered transmissions from the surface. Fragmentary reports of massive civilian casualties, infrastructure collapse, and atmospheric disturbances. The Auspex is also detecting some kind of gravitic anomaly centered on the planetary capital. Analysis, Kant demanded, his augmetic eye focusing on the scrolling data streams. Inconclusive, sir. Whatever's happening down there is beyond our current understanding of physics. The tech adepts are claiming their machine spirits are screaming warnings about reality distortion fields and temporal echoes. If I didn't know better, I'd say someone was rewriting the laws of nature itself. Through the viewports, Metallica Prime looked almost peaceful from orbit. The industrial smog that normally choked its atmosphere had cleared in places, revealing geometric patterns of destruction too perfect to be natural. Where the capital city had once sprawled across hundreds of square kilometers, now there was only a circular void that reflected starlight like a mirror. Vox Lord Commander Guilliman, Kant ordered. Priority Alpha transmission. Inform the Lord Commander that the threat assessment may have been understated. This entity isn't just dangerous, it's rewriting reality on a planetary scale. The message raced through the void, carried by the ship's astropath despite the growing psychic turbulence around the system. On Macragge, Guilliman received the report while reviewing tactical analyses of previous Daemon incursions. The Primarch's enhanced mind processed the implications in moments, cross-referencing the energy signatures with xenotech artifacts recovered during the Great Crusade. What he found in those ancient files filled him with a cold that had nothing to do with the Fortress Monastery's climate control systems. The artifacts described in the report matched theoretical constructs outlined in recovered Dark Age technology databases, items of such power that their mere existence had been deemed impossible by the Mechanicus hierarchy. If such things truly existed, if this Titan commanded them, then conventional military responses would prove worse than useless. They would be suicide. Yet even as despair threatened to claim him, Guilliman felt the familiar spark of tactical inspiration that had served him through 10,000 years of war. Every enemy had weaknesses, every power source had limits. This Thanos might reshape matter and energy at will, but he was still bound by certain fundamental constraints. The key was discovering what those constraints were before the Titan's rampage spread beyond containment. Assemble the full War Council, Guilliman commanded. Signal Fleet Admiral Shureka to prepare the Macragge Defense Fleet for immediate deployment. And contact the Adeptus Mechanicus. I want every xenotech specialist they have working on countermeasures within the hour. The Fortress Monastery's strategic chambers filled with the sound of marching feet and mechanical interfaces cycling through activation sequences. Throughout the Ultramarines' realm, ancient war machines groaned to life as their crews ran through blessed rites of preparation. In the depths of the fortress's archives, tech adepts pulled forbidden tomes from their sealed vaults, their binary chants carrying prayers to the Omnissiah for wisdom in the face of impossible foes. On Metallica Prime, Thanos had reached the coastal regions where the planet's agri-complexes stretched toward polluted seas. Here, the Imperium's endless hunger for resources was laid bare, vast agricultural zones where human workers toiled 16-hour shifts to feed the war machine. The sight filled him with fresh disgust, another confirmation that this galaxy was beyond salvation through mercy. The agricultural workers fled before his advance, their overseers abandoning production quotas in the face of something that made their worst nightmares seem pleasant. Thanos walked through their fields like a god of harvest, his gauntleted hand extended toward the swaying grain. The reality stone pulsed, and suddenly the crops were not grain but ash, not sustenance but dust. Miles of farmland transformed in moments, their potential to feed billions rendered into sterile wasteland. Above him, the sky began to burn. The Imperial Navy had finally arrived in force, their strike cruisers and battle barges dropping from the warp like falling stars. Admiral Constantin Valdez commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Emperor's Wrath, its plasma batteries already cycling through the first stages of their blessed ignition sequence. Around him, a dozen capital ships formed a perfect sphere of interlocking fire zones, their crews trained to a razor's edge and blessed by the finest war hymns the ecclesiarchy could provide. All batteries, "Target the surface anomaly," Valdez commanded from his throne upon the bridge. "Lance strikes first, then plasma bombardment. I want that thing reduced to its component atoms." The space around Metallica Prime lit up like a newborn star as the Imperial fleet unleashed its fury. Lance batteries capable of cracking continental shelves focused their energy on a single point, while plasma torpedoes followed in their wake like falling comets. The bombardment was precise, overwhelming, and absolutely devastating to everything it touched except its intended target. Thanos raised his fist toward the sky, and the space stone blazed with azure light. Reality folded like origami around him, creating a pocket dimension where the laws of physics bowed to his will rather than the universe's. The naval bombardment struck his position and simply vanished, its energy redirected through dimensional space to emerge elsewhere. On the far side of the planet, mountain ranges exploded into vapor as lance beams meant for the Titan instead carved new canyons through solid rock. "Impossible," Admiral Valdez whispered, his augmetic jaw clicking as he processed sensor readings that made no sense. "Our targeting solutions were perfect. The machine spirits confirmed target acquisition. How did he redirect our fire?" His answer came in the form of the Titan's response. Thanos clenched his fist and the Power Stone erupted with violet radiance. The wave of raw energy that burst from his position struck the Imperial fleet like the fist of an angry god, void shields flaring and dying under the assault. The frigate Noble Sacrifice simply ceased to exist, its hull transformed to energy and scattered across the system. 3 destroyers followed moments later, their crew's final Vox transmissions lost in the screaming static of dying machine spirits. The surviving ships scattered like leaves before a hurricane, their captains abandoning all pretense of coordinated attack patterns. Admiral Valdez watched his command come apart around him, decades of training and discipline crumbling in the face of power that laughed at the concept of conventional warfare. Yet even as despair clawed at his mind, the Admiral felt the familiar weight of duty settling on his shoulders. "All ships, execute orbital gamma protocol," he commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding him. "If we cannot destroy this entity through conventional means, we will deny him his prize. Prepare for exterminatus." The cyclonic torpedoes launched from a dozen different ships, their blessed warheads containing enough destructive force to crack a planet's crust. Each weapon was a relic of the dark age of technology, its machine spirit howling hymns of destruction as it plummeted toward the world below. They would turn Metallica Prime into a ball of molten rock, destroying the Titan along with every living thing on the planetary surface. Thanos watched the torpedoes descend like falling stars and smiled. The Time Stone pulsed on his gauntlet, showing him the branching pathways of cause and effect that stretched out from this moment. He saw the weapons detonating, saw the planet's death, saw the Imperial fleet retreating with their Pyrrhic victory. He also saw something else, a possibility that appealed to his sense of poetic justice. The torpedoes struck the planetary surface and exploded with the fury of dying suns. Yet instead of consuming Metallica Prime in cleansing fire, their energy was captured and contained within the shifting matrix of the Reality Stone. Thanos absorbed the planet-killing force like a sponge absorbing water, letting the power flow through him until every atom of his being blazed with contained destruction. Then he gave it back. The wave of energy that erupted from the planet's surface struck the Imperial fleet with redoubled force, cyclonic torpedo warheads enhanced and magnified by the Titan's will. Ships that had survived the Horus Heresy and the 13th Black Crusade died in moments, their ancient hulls no match for their own weapons turned against them. Admiral Valdez had just enough time to whisper a prayer to the Emperor before the Emperor's wrath vanished in a ball of white-hot plasma. In the silence that followed, Thanos stood alone on the surface of a dying world, his form wreathed in the ghostly light of 6 impossible gems. Around him, the landscape had been transformed into something from a madman's nightmare, crystalline formations that pulsed with their own inner light, stretching toward a sky that bled colors that had no names. The very air shimmered with residual energy, reality itself left traumatized by the forces that had been unleashed. Yet even as he surveyed his handiwork, Thanos felt the stirring of something vast and hungry in the spaces between dimensions. The warp pressed close around him, its denizens drawn by the psychic screams of billions of dying souls. In the roiling chaos of the Imperium, things that had never known names began to take notice of the purple giant who reshaped reality with such casual ease. 4 voices spoke to him then, each one carrying the weight of cosmic authority and infinite malice. They were the Chaos Gods, the dark powers that had fed on this galaxy's suffering since before humanity first looked up at the stars. Khorne offered him endless war, a galaxy where strength alone determined survival. Tsench whispered of change and mutation, reality made fluid and ever-shifting. Nurgle promised the peace of entropy, the silence that came when all things rotted to their essential components. Slaanesh sang of sensation beyond imagining, pleasure and pain refined to their purest forms. Thanos listened to their offers with the patience of one who had heard such whispers before. In his home universe, he had been courted by cosmic abstracts and universal concepts, beings of power that made these so-called gods seem like children playing with matches. He had rejected them all in service to a higher truth, a perfect balance that would bring peace to all existence. "Your offers are generous," he replied to the darkness between stars. "But I have no need of power beyond what I already wield. I seek only balance, the restoration of order to chaos. Your endless hunger is part of the disease I have come to cure." The silence that followed his rejection was pregnant with malice and wounded pride. In the warp's depths, 4 aspects of absolute evil began to stir with something approaching concern. This mortal's will was strong enough to resist their direct influence, his purpose focused enough to turn aside their greatest temptations. If he could not be corrupted or controlled, then he represented a threat to their eternal reign over the galaxy's soul. Plans began to form in minds that spanned dimensions, schemes that would turn the Imperium's own defenders against this new threat. If the Purple Titan wished to bring balance to the galaxy, then they would teach him the true meaning of chaos. They would show him what happened when order met entropy, when perfection collided with mutation, when balance faced the infinite hunger of gods who had fed on war for 10,000 years. The first pieces were already moving. On distant Terra, the Emperor stirred upon his golden throne, his consciousness brushing against dreams of purple fire and dying stars. In the depths of the Eye of Terror, daemon princes began to gather their legions. On 1,000 worlds, cultists felt their patron god's displeasure and began to chant hymns of summoning and destruction. The galaxy held its breath, sensing that something fundamental had changed in the balance of power. The long war between order and chaos was about to gain a new participant, one whose very existence threatened to rewrite the rules that had governed reality since time began. In the darkness between stars, ancient prophecies stirred to life, speaking of purple death and golden chains, of a balance that would tip the scales toward either eternal peace or absolute annihilation. Thanos felt none of this cosmic stirring as he prepared to leave the ruins of Metallica Prime behind. The Soul Stone pulsed on his gauntlet, showing him the spiritual echoes of every life he had ended, every dream he had snuffed out in service to his greater vision. Their faces haunted him as they always did, a reminder of the cost that balance demanded. Yet he bore their weight willingly, knowing that their sacrifice would purchase peace for countless trillions yet unborn. Behind him, the survivors of his culling began the slow process of rebuilding their world. Some would die in the harsh years ahead, unable to adapt to a reality where resources were suddenly abundant but infrastructure lay in ruins. Others would thrive, their children growing strong in the ashes of the old order. In time, they would either vindicate his vision or prove that even gods could be wrong about the nature of mercy. The Space Stone flared, and Thanos stepped through folded reality toward his next destination. The Mind Stone had shown him the locations of the Imperium's greatest population centers, worlds where billions lived in squalor and desperation while their masters gorged themselves on the fruits of endless conquest. Each world would receive the same gift he had given Metallica Prime, perfect balance through necessary loss. Yet as he emerged from the dimensional portal above the hive world of Necromunda, Thanos found himself facing something unexpected. The void around the planet swarmed with ships, but these were not Imperial vessels. Their hulls bore the 8-pointed Star of Chaos, their very presence causing reality to twist and buckle around them. At their head flew a massive battle barge, its hull inscribed with runes that hurt to look at directly. From the command throne of the Despoiler's flagship, Ezekiel Abaddon gazed up at the purple giant floating in the void. The War Master of Chaos had felt the disturbance in the warp when Thanos first arrived in this galaxy, had watched through scrying flames as the Titan carved his path through Metallica Prime. Here was power that could tip the balance of the long war, a force that might finally bring the Imperium to its knees. "Hail, destroyer of worlds." Abaddon's voice carried across the void through Vox channels twisted with Daemon song. "I am Ezekiel Abaddon, chosen of the dark gods, breaker of Cadia and bane of the false emperor. Your deeds have impressed my masters. They would speak with you." Thanos regarded the Chaos fleet with cold analysis. He could sense the taint that clung to these ships like a second skin, the way their crews had been warped by exposure to powers that existed beyond the boundaries of sanity. They were symptoms of the disease he had come to cure, corruption given form and set loose to spread their madness across the stars. "I have already heard your gods' whispers," Thanos replied, his voice carrying easily through the vacuum. "I found their offers lacking. They seek to perpetuate the very chaos I have come to end." Abaddon's laughter echoed through the fleet's Vox channels, a sound like grinding metal and breaking glass. "You misunderstand our purpose, Titan. We do not serve chaos for its own sake. We seek to tear down a rotten edifice so that something stronger can take its place. Your culling of the weak serves the same end. You serve entropy masquerading as purpose," Thanos countered. "I have seen your kind before, in 1,000 different forms across as many worlds. You destroy but never build. You tear down without creating. You are the antithesis of balance." The talon of Horus ignited with fell energies as Abaddon rose from his command throne. Around him, his bridge crew began chanting in the dark tongue, their voices weaving patterns of power that made the ship's hull groan with barely contained force. In the warp, Daemon legions pressed against the barriers between dimensions, eager to taste the soul of one who had dared to spurn their master's gifts. "Then you will die as the Imperium dies," Abaddon snarled, slowly, in agony, crying out for salvation that will never come. The Chaos fleet opened fire as one, their weapons blessed with the malice of the dark gods. Warp-touched plasma bolts and Daemon-possessed missiles streaked toward Thanos like falling stars, each one carrying enough destructive force to level a city. Behind them came boarding torpedoes filled with Chaos Space Marines, whose gene seed had been corrupted beyond all recognition, their forms twisted into shapes that violated every law of nature and sanity. Thanos raised the Infinity Gauntlet and reality bent to accommodate his will. The Power Stone absorbed the incoming fire while the Space Stone redirected it back toward its source. Chaos vessels died in the light of their own weapons, their crews screaming prayers to gods who laughed at their suffering. The boarding torpedoes struck an invisible barrier and simply stopped, their momentum translated into potential energy that Thanos held in reserve like a patient predator. The Time Stone pulsed, and suddenly the Chaos fleet was moving backward through its attack run. Weapons that had fired moments before drew their energy back into their barrels. Destroyed ships reformed from clouds of vapor and twisted metal, the very concept of cause and effect bent until past and future became meaningless abstractions. Then Thanos released his hold on time, and causality snapped back like a broken spring. The Chaos fleet died twice in the span of a heartbeat, first from their own weapons and then from the temporal whiplash that tore through their hulls like invisible fire. Only Abaddon's flagship survived, protected by wards that had been inscribed in the blood of saints and the tears of martyrs. The War Master himself stood unharmed upon his bridge, his ancient armor smoking but intact. "Impressive," Abaddon admitted, his voice carrying a grudging respect. "But you have made a grave error, Titan. You have shown the dark gods that you cannot be corrupted or controlled. They will not suffer such defiance to exist. The warp tore open around Necromunda like a festering wound, bleeding daemon legions into real space with the fury of frustrated gods. Greater daemons led the charge, their forms towering monuments to humanity's darkest impulses, bloodthirsters with axes that could cleave through continents. Lords of change whose very thoughts could rewrite the laws of physics. Great unclean ones whose touch brought decay to the concept of existence itself. Keepers of secrets whose beauty was so terrible it could drive mortals to madness with a single glance. They came in numbers beyond counting, an ocean of malice and hunger given form. The planet below writhed under their influence, its surface buckling and twisting as the barrier between reality and nightmare wore thin. In the Underhive, gang wars stopped as mortal enemies united against horrors that made their darkest legends seem like children's tales. Thanos looked upon the daemon host and felt something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. In his home universe, he had faced cosmic abstracts and universal concepts, but those beings at least operated according to recognizable rules. These creatures existed outside logic, their very presence a violation of everything he understood about cause and effect. The reality stone flared as he reached out to reshape the daemons into something more manageable, but his will met resistance unlike anything he had encountered before. These beings existed partially outside normal space-time, their essence anchored in a realm where thought became substance and emotion held physical weight. He could hurt them, perhaps even banish them, but he could not simply wish them out of existence. The first wave struck him like a tide of claws and fangs and screaming hatred. Bloodletters carved at his armor with daemon-forged blades, while horrors hurled bolts of warp fire that burned with the fury of dying stars. Pink and blue flame washed over him, each impact sending feedback through the Mind Stone that threatened to overwhelm his enhanced consciousness. Thanos fought like the god he had become, each gesture unleashing power that could reshape worlds. The Power Stone turned his fists into weapons that could punch through the hull of a battleship. The Space Stone allowed him to be in a dozen places at once, striking at enemies who thought themselves safely out of reach. The Time Stone showed him their attacks seconds before they were made, giving him the advantage of perfect precognition. Yet for every daemon he destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. They poured from the warp like water from a broken dam, their numbers replenished by the very act of violence he used to fight them. Worse, he could feel their influence beginning to affect the Infinity Stones themselves. The gems flickered and pulsed with unstable energy, their connection to his home universe strained by the chaotic energies of this benighted galaxy. A bloodthirster the size of a titan charged through the melee, its axe trailing flames that burned cold as the void between stars. Thanos caught the weapon's blade between his palms, the impact sending shockwaves through the surrounding daemons. For a moment that lasted eternity, god and daemon stared into each other's eyes, each seeing reflected there a hunger that could never be satisfied. "You seek balance," the bloodthirster rumbled, its voice like grinding tectonic plates. "Yet you bring only death. You claim to serve order, yet you sow chaos with every world you touch. You are no different from us, Purple One. You simply lie to yourself about your nature." The words struck deeper than any blade, carrying with them an echo of truth that Thanos could not entirely dismiss. How many worlds had he broken in service to his vision? How many civilizations had he ground to dust beneath the weight of his good intentions? In seeking to save the universe from itself, had he become the very thing he had sought to destroy? The moment of doubt passed in less than a heartbeat, but it was enough. The bloodthirster's axe bit deep into his shoulder, daemon-forged metal parting even his enhanced flesh like paper. Golden blood, thick with the power of the Infinity Stones, splattered across the void. Where it touched the daemons, they screamed and writhed, their forms beginning to discorporate under the influence of ordered reality. Thanos smiled, understanding flooding through him like a tide of golden light. The answer had been there all along, hidden in the nature of the conflict itself. These creatures existed because of chaos, fed on discord and suffering. They could not survive in a realm of perfect balance. could not maintain coherence when faced with the ordered harmony he sought to impose. The Soul Stone blazed within a fire as Thanos reached out with his consciousness, not to destroy the daemon host, but to transform them. He touched each twisted soul with the weight of absolute balance, showing them visions of what they could become if they abandoned their endless hunger. Some resisted, their nature too far gone for redemption. These he allowed to fade, their essence scattered across dimensions where even memory could not find them. Others, the younger daemons whose corruption had not yet consumed their core selves, he offered a choice: serve order willingly, or face the slow dissolution that came with fighting the tide of history itself. Most chose service, their forms shifting from nightmare to something approaching beauty as they accepted the burden of balance. The greater demons proved more resilient, their connection to their patron gods too strong to be severed by anything less than direct divine intervention. Yet even they began to falter as the very nature of the battlefield shifted around them. Reality was becoming ordered, chaotic energies crystallizing into geometric patterns that followed mathematical laws rather than emotional impulses. Abaddon watched from his flagship as his daemon allies began to turn against their summoners, their newly ordered minds rejecting the chaos that had once defined their existence. This was not how the battle was supposed to unfold. The dark gods had promised him victory, had shown him visions of the Titan's broken form feeding their eternal hunger. Instead, he was watching the fundamental nature of daemonkind being rewritten by will alone. Lord Abaddon called his sorcerer lieutenant Zaraphiston, "The warp is becoming stable. The daemon legions are reverting to some kind of baseline form. Our connection to the dark gods is weakening." The War Master of Chaos felt something he had not experienced in 10,000 years of war: genuine fear. Not for his own life, for death held no terror for one who had walked in the realm of gods. No, this was fear of irrelevance, of a universe where his purpose no longer held meaning. If chaos could be tamed, if the very daemons could be made to serve order, then what place was there for those who had built their lives on eternal war? "Signal the fleet," Abaddon commanded, his voice steady despite the cosmic realization dawning around him. "Full retreat to the Eye of Terror. We must warn the dark gods of what we have witnessed here." The surviving Chaos vessels began their withdrawal, their hulls trailing warp fire as they prepared to tear holes in reality's fabric. Yet as they opened their dimensional portals, they found their path blocked by something impossible. The very warp itself had begun to crystallize around Necromunda, its chaotic energies frozen into stable geometric patterns that prevented travel between dimensions. Thanos floated in the center of the transformation, the Infinity Gauntlet blazing with power that made the local star seem dim by comparison. Around him, reality was being rewritten on a fundamental level, the basic laws of physics adjusted to favor order over entropy. The converted demons danced through the void like living constellations, their forms now burning with the pure light of mathematical perfection. "You cannot escape," Thanos declared, his voice carrying across the system with the weight of absolute authority. "This galaxy has been chosen for salvation. The age of chaos ends here." The reality stone pulsed, and suddenly the fleeing chaos vessels found their hulls transforming around them. Ancient adamantium became crystalline lattices that sang with harmonic frequencies. Daemonic mutations reversed themselves, corrupted gene seed returning to its original purity. 10,000 years of accumulated corruption simply ceased to exist, reality rewritten to accommodate a new truth where chaos had never found purchase. Abaddon felt the change beginning in his own flesh, his ancient augmentations and mutations starting to fade like morning mist. The Talon of Horus grew dim, its daemon-possessed machine spirit crying out in confusion as order imposed itself upon its chaotic nature. For a moment that felt like eternity, the War Master stood balanced on the knife's edge between damnation and redemption. His soul offered a choice that had been denied him for millennia. He could accept the change, let the burden of 10,000 years of hatred fade into the balanced perfection that Thanos offered. He could become what he had been before his fall, a loyal son of the Emperor serving a greater purpose than his own ambition. The option hung before him like a glittering jewel, beautiful and terrible in its simplicity. Instead, Ezekiel Abaddon chose defiance. "I am the War Master of Chaos," he roared, his voice echoing across dimensions as he drew upon reserves of hatred deeper than any ocean. "I am the sword that will pierce the Emperor's heart, the darkness that will swallow his light. I will not be remade in your image, Titan. I will die as I have lived, in eternal war." The effort nearly killed him, but Abaddon managed to tear a hole in the crystallizing warp through sheer force of will and accumulated malice. His flagship plunged through the portal like a falling star, carrying him away from Thanos' sphere of influence and back toward the relative safety of the Eye of Terror. Behind him, his fleet and daemon allies completed their transformation, their chaotic nature sublimated into something approaching divine order. In the depths of the warp, 4 voices screamed in unison as they felt their hold on the galaxy begin to slip. The balance that Thanos sought was anathema to their very existence, a force that could unravel the careful work of eons. If this continued, if order truly triumphed over chaos, then the dark gods themselves might face extinction for the first time since the birth of consciousness in the galaxy. Plans within plans began to unfold, schemes that reached back to the very foundation of the Imperium itself. If the Titan could not be corrupted or destroyed through conventional means, then perhaps he could be turned against himself. There was one being in this galaxy whose will matched Thanos' own, whose purpose burned with the fury of 10,000 suns. The master of mankind sat upon his golden throne, a god in all but name, and his dreams of order were older than memory itself. On Terra, the Emperor stirred. The psychic shockwave of his awakening rippled through the galaxy like a tsunami of pure thought, touching every human soul from the core worlds to the eastern fringe. Space Marines knelt in sudden rapture as they felt their Gene Father's presence wash over them. Imperial Guard regiments burst into spontaneous prayer as the saints of old walked among their ranks. Even the tech priests of Mars felt something stirring in their mechanical hearts, a ghost of the Omnissiah's touch that made their augmetics sing with harmonious frequencies. In the depths of the Imperial Palace, the Adeptus Custodes stood at perfect attention as their Lord and Master spoke for the first time in 10 millennia. His voice was the sound of solar wind through void steel, the whisper of neutron stars colliding in the depths of space. When he spoke, reality itself listened. "Bring me Robute Guilliman," the Emperor commanded. "The balance of the galaxy shifts, and we must be ready to meet what comes." The Lord Commander of the Imperium received the summons as he stood in the strategium of his flagship, studying reports of the Chaos Fleet's mysterious retreat from Necromunda. The transformation of daemon legions into something resembling Imperial auxiliaries defied every principle of warfare he had learned during the Great Crusade. Yet the evidence was undeniable, captured on pict feeds that showed creatures of nightmare kneeling in supplication to a being of immense power. "Father calls," Guilliman whispered to himself, the words carrying weight that his mortal crew could not comprehend. He had not spoken directly with the Emperor since his resurrection. Their communication filtered through the psychic medium of the Astronomicon. Now, for the first time in 10,000 years, the Master of Mankind was fully awake and aware. The journey to Terra took subjective hours through the warp, Guilliman's fleet racing along stabilized corridors that had suddenly become as calm as mountain lakes. The Eye of Terror itself seemed diminished, its chaotic energies crystallizing into stable patterns that reminded the Primarch of mathematical proofs written in fire and starlight. Whatever Thanos had done at Necromunda was spreading, order imposing itself upon a galaxy that had known only war for millennia. The meeting took place in the deepest chambers of the Imperial Palace, in halls that had not seen visitors since the Horus Heresy tore the galaxy apart. The Emperor sat not upon his golden throne but in a simple chair of carved wood, his form somehow both more and less than the godlike figure Guilliman remembered from his youth. Here was humanity's true father, stripped of 10,000 years of accumulated myth and legend, yet no less mighty for the revelation of his mortality. "My son," the Emperor said, and his voice held all the warmth that had been absent from their previous encounters. You have done well in your service to the Imperium, better than I had any right to expect after my failure during the heresy. Guilliman knelt before his father, not from duty but from love freely given. Father, the galaxy faces a new threat. This titangent entity has demonstrated power beyond our understanding. Our conventional forces are useless against him. I know, the Emperor replied. I have watched his progress through the dreams of dying worlds. He seeks what I have always sought. Order imposed upon chaos, balance restored to a universe drunk on its own suffering. In another time, another place, he might have been a valued ally. Then why do I sense your concern? Guilliman asked, if his goals align with our own. Because his methods are flawed, the Emperor said sadly. He believes that balance can be achieved through reduction, that harmony comes from removing half of all existence. I learned long ago that true order must grow from within, must be chosen rather than imposed. His way leads only to stagnation and eventual collapse. The Emperor rose from his chair and walked to a window that looked out across the sprawling majesty of the Imperial Palace. Beyond its walls, Terra itself was changing, the accumulated pollution of millennia crystallizing into geometric patterns that spoke of mathematical perfection. The transformation was beautiful and terrible, a world reborn in the image of absolute order. He has already begun his work here, the Emperor continued. The warp currents around Terra are stabilizing, the daemon legions that have plagued our borders for centuries dissolving into harmless patterns of organized energy. In days or weeks he will arrive to complete his great work. Half of Terra's population will simply cease to exist, chosen at random by a mind that believes it serves the greater good. Guilliman felt ice forming in his enhanced metabolism as he contemplated the implications. Terra housed not just billions of civilians but the entire infrastructure of the Imperium, the bureaucratic machinery that kept 1 million worlds functioning in rough coordination. Lose half of that overnight, and the entire galactic civilization would collapse into anarchy within months. What would you have me do, Father? The Primarch asked. Our weapons cannot touch him. Our fleets are less than dust before his power. The Emperor turned from the window, and for a moment, Guilliman saw something he had never expected to see in his father's eyes: uncertainty. The master of mankind, the being who had united Terra and launched humanity's conquest of the stars, was genuinely unsure of the path forward. There is a way, the Emperor said finally, but it requires a sacrifice I am not sure I have the right to ask of you. In the space between heartbeats, the Emperor's consciousness touched his son's, sharing memories and possibilities that stretched across the breadth of human history. Guilliman saw the true cost of order without growth, civilizations that had achieved perfect balance only to stagnate and die in their crystalline perfection. He saw the alternative, a galaxy where chaos and order existed in eternal tension, where suffering and growth were inextricably linked, where progress came only through struggle. You want me to stop him, Guilliman said. It was not a question. I want you to save him, the Emperor corrected. Thanos is not evil, merely misguided. His power could reshape the galaxy for the better, but only if he can be made to understand that true balance requires both destruction and creation, both order and controlled chaos. You must reach him before his transformation of Terra is complete. You must show him another path. The Primarch stood, his hand moving instinctively to the hilt of the Emperor's sword. The weapon hummed with psychic energy, its blade forged from the same power that lit the Astronomicon and held the webway gates closed. It was one of the few artifacts in the galaxy that might actually wound a being of Thanos' power, assuming he could get close enough to use it. And if he cannot be reached? Guilliman asked. If his conviction is too strong to be swayed? The Emperor's expression grew infinitely sad. Then you must do what I could not bring myself to do during the heresy. You must kill a son for the greater good of all. The journey back to his fleet passed in contemplative silence, Guilliman's enhanced mind processing the weight of his father's request. To face Thanos in direct combat would be suicide under normal circumstances. The Titan commanded power that laughed at concepts like space and time, reality bending to accommodate his will like water flowing around stone. Yet the Emperor's sword was not a normal weapon, and Guilliman was not a normal warrior. He was a Primarch, a being created to stand against the darkness and hold the line when all others fell. He had faced daemon princes and fallen brothers, had stood against the tide of chaos itself and emerged victorious. If Thanos could be reached through reason, then Guilliman would find the words. If not, then he would find another way. The transformation was visible from orbit as Guilliman's fleet approached Terra, the cradle of humanity glowing with inner light as its fundamental nature was rewritten. The chaotic sprawl of the hive cities had crystallized into perfect geometric patterns, their inhabitants moving through daily routines with mechanical precision. The very air seemed to sing with mathematical harmonies, pollution and toxins converted into stable compounds that no longer poisoned the atmosphere. It was beautiful, it was perfect, it was absolutely terrifying. Thanos stood at the center of the transformation, his form visible even from the void as he raised the Infinity Gauntlet toward Terra's molten core. The Reality Stone blazed with power beyond comprehension, its energies reaching deep into the planet's structure to impose order upon chaos. Tectonic plates that had shifted randomly for billions of years suddenly locked into stable configurations. Volcanic activity ceased as magma flows crystallized into permanent channels. Even the planet's rotation slowed to match a perfect mathematical constant. Lord Commander, Captain Sicarius reported from the bridge. We're detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the system. It's as though someone is rewriting the fundamental laws of physics in real time. Signal the fleet to maintain orbit, Guilliman commanded. This is not a battle we can win through firepower. He paused, checking the seals on his armor one final time. Prepare a Thunderhawk for immediate descent. I'm going to the surface. The journey through Terra's atmosphere was like flying through a stained glass window, the air itself refracting light into rainbow patterns that followed geometric rules rather than physical ones. The Thunderhawk's machine spirit sang hymns of confusion as its sensors tried to process readings that violated every principle of engineering. Yet somehow the ancient aircraft held together, its blessed hull shielded by faith and the Emperor's own protection. Guilliman found Thanos in the ruins of the Imperial Palace, standing where the Golden Throne had once held vigil over humanity's dreams. The ancient device had been transformed into something resembling a crystalline flower, its psychic amplifiers now pulsing with energies that followed mathematical rather than emotional patterns. At its heart sat not the Emperor but a geometric construct of pure thought, consciousness without flesh, maintaining the balance of an entire galaxy. "You have come to stop me," Thanos said without turning, his voice carrying clearly through the transformed air. "Your father's love for his children blinds him to the necessity of sacrifice. He would rather see the galaxy burn than accept the peace I offer." "I have come to understand you," Guilliman replied, his hand resting on the Emperor's sword, but not yet drawing it. "Your vision of balance, your desire to end suffering. In another time, another place, we might have been allies in that cause." Thanos turned then, and Guilliman saw something unexpected in the Titan's eyes. Sorrow. Here was a being who carried the weight of universal genocide on his soul, who had chosen to become the most hated figure in existence so that others might live in peace. His conviction was absolute, his purpose pure, and that somehow made him more terrible than any daemon or fallen Primarch. "Then you understand why I cannot be stopped," Thanos said. "I have seen the end result of unchecked growth, watched civilizations consume themselves in their endless hunger for more. This galaxy is diseased, its people so consumed with war that they have forgotten how to live in peace. Only through pruning can the tree grow strong again. But what of those who remain?" Guilliman asked. "What becomes of them in your perfect galaxy? Do they live, or do they merely exist?" The question struck deeper than any blade, carrying with it an echo of doubt that had haunted Thanos since his first glimpse of the transformed world below. He had achieved everything he set out to accomplish, imposed perfect order upon chaos, created a realm where suffering was merely a memory. Yet something felt wrong. a fundamental flaw in his vision that he could not quite identify. "They will thrive," Thanos said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Without the pressure of overpopulation, without the endless competition for scarce resources, they will be free to pursue higher purposes. Art, philosophy, the contemplation of universal truths. Will they?" Gilliman pressed. "Or will they stagnate in their crystalline perfection, too ordered to grow, too balanced to dream? I have seen worlds like the one you're creating, Thanos. They are beautiful, they are peaceful, they are dead." The Titan's expression flickered, uncertainty creeping into features that had not known doubt for millennia. The Soul Stone pulsed on his gauntlet, showing him glimpses of possible futures where his perfect order led not to paradise but to extinction. Worlds where creativity died for lack of conflict, where progress stopped because there was no need for improvement, where entire species simply faded away in their crystalline prisons. "No," Thanos whispered, but the word lacked force. "Balance requires sacrifice. Order demands the suppression of chaos. There is no other way." "There is," Gilliman said, and now he did draw the Emperor's sword, its blade blazing with psychic fire. "The way of controlled growth, guided evolution. The recognition that suffering and joy, order and chaos must exist in tension for life to have meaning. Your balance is the balance of death, Titan. I offer you the balance of life." For a moment that lasted eternity, the two beings stood facing each other in the heart of the transformed palace. Around them, reality held its breath, waiting to see which vision of the future would prevail. The Infinity Stones flickered on Thanos' gauntlet, their connection to his home universe strained by the philosophical weight of the choice before him. Then Thanos raised his fist, and the Power Stone erupted with violet fury. The battle that followed was unlike any conflict the galaxy had ever seen. Two gods clashed in the ruins of humanity's greatest achievement, their struggle sending shockwaves through dimensions that lesser beings could not even comprehend. Thanos wielded power that could reshape continents, while Gilliman fought with the fury of a son defending his father's dream. The Emperor's sword carved wounds that even the Reality Stone struggled to heal, its blessed edge finding gaps in the Titan's defenses that should not have existed. Yet for every blow Gilliman landed, Thanos struck back with force that would have shattered moons. The Space Stone allowed him to be everywhere at once, while the Time Stone showed him every possible attack before it was made. Yet gradually, inevitably, Thanos began to gain the upper hand. His power was simply too vast, his control over reality too complete. Gilliman's armor cracked under repeated impacts, his enhanced physiology pushed beyond even its superhuman limits. Blood flowed from wounds that would have killed lesser beings instantly, yet the Primarch fought on through will alone. "You cannot win this," Thanos said as he caught the Emperor's sword between his fingers, the psychic blade's edge held motionless by the Titan's will. "Your conviction is admirable, but conviction alone cannot overcome cosmic power." "You're right," Gilliman gasped, his strength finally failing as Thanos lifted him from the crystalline floor. "I cannot win this fight, but perhaps I don't need to." The Primarch's free hand moved to a device at his belt, a simple voxcaster that had been modified with archaeotech components salvaged from the Golden Throne. With his dying breath, he activated it, sending a signal that raced through the transformed palace's crystal networks and out into the void beyond. "For the Emperor," Gilliman whispered, and then the Power Stone flared and his body simply ceased to exist. The signal reached the Astronomican's transformed apparatus and was amplified beyond all reason, becoming a psychic scream that echoed across the galaxy. On a million worlds, humanity heard the death cry of their greatest champion and responded with fury that transcended space and time. The collective will of an entire species, focused by grief and guided by the remnants of the Emperor's power, struck at the one who had murdered their hope. Thanos staggered as the psychic assault hit him, the Mind Stone cracking under pressure that no single consciousness could withstand. For the first time since claiming the Infinity Gauntlet, he felt genuine pain, not of the body but of the soul. Every human who had ever lived, every dream that had been snuffed out, every hope that had died beneath his perfect order, pressed against his consciousness like a tide of molten suffering. In that moment of weakness, the transformed palace began to revert. The crystalline structures that had replaced ancient stone and steel wavered and collapsed. The geometric perfection that had been imposed upon Terra's surface cracked like glass, revealing the chaotic sprawl of the original hive cities beneath. Most importantly, the Golden Throne reformed from its crystalline shell, its psychic amplifiers once again attuned to the Emperor's will. The Master of Mankind rose from his throne for the first time in 10 millennia, his form blazing with power that made the Infinity Stones seem dim by comparison. He was not the corpse god that his enemies claimed, nor the distant deity his subjects worshipped, but something far more terrible and beautiful, humanity's collective will given form and purpose. "Thanos of Titan," the Emperor said, his voice shaking the foundations of reality. "You have taken my son from me. You have threatened the future of my species. For these crimes, you will answer." The battle between God and Titan lasted only moments, but its echoes would resonate through the warp for millennia to come. The Emperor's power was not greater than Thanos's in raw terms, but it was older, deeper, rooted in the collective dreams of an entire species rather than the will of a single being. When the Infinity Stones finally shattered under the strain, their fragments scattered across dimensions where even memory could not follow them. Thanos fell to his knees in the ruins of his perfect vision, his golden armor cracked and his purple skin pale with exhaustion. Around him, Terra continued its return to its original state, chaos reasserting itself over order in 10,000 small ways, yet the change was not complete, could never be complete. Some part of his vision had taken root in the galaxy's consciousness, a seed of balance that would grow and evolve in ways he had never imagined. "Why?" Thanos asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I offered them peace. I offered them perfection. Why did they choose suffering instead?" The Emperor knelt beside his fallen enemy, his expression filled with something approaching compassion. "Because suffering is the price of growth, Titan. Because perfection is another word for death. Because a universe without chaos is a universe without hope." As Terra's twin suns set over the ruins of the Imperial Palace, Thanos closed his eyes and let out his final breath. His body crumbled to dust that was caught by the evening wind and scattered across the world he had tried to save. Yet his legacy lived on in the changes he had wrought, the balance he had brought to a galaxy that had known only endless war. In the years that followed, scholars would debate whether Thanos had been humanity's greatest enemy or its most unexpected savior. His culling of half the galaxy's population had indeed reduced the pressure on scarce resources, allowing the survivors to rebuild their civilizations along more sustainable lines. The transformation of Daemon legions into beings of order had weakened Chaos's hold on the galaxy, giving humanity breathing space it had not enjoyed since the Horus Heresy. Most importantly, his example had shown that even the darkest philosophies could contain seeds of wisdom, that balance was indeed necessary for survival, but that it must be chosen rather than imposed. The Emperor stood alone in the ruins of his throne room, watching as Terra's cities slowly rebuilt themselves from the ashes of transformation. His son was gone, another casualty of the long war that had claimed so many of his children, yet Robut Guilliman's sacrifice had not been in vain. The galaxy lived, wounded but whole, changed but not conquered. In the depths of the Imperial Palace, tech adepts worked to restore the Golden Throne's original functions. The Astronomicon flickered back to life, its light once again guiding humanity through the treacherous currents of the warp. Yet something was different now, a subtle harmony in the psychic beacon's song that spoke of balance achieved through struggle rather than imposed through force. Across the galaxy, the survivors of Thanos' culling began to adapt to their new reality. Some fell into despair, unable to comprehend a universe where their loved ones had simply ceased to exist. Others found strength in grief, using their loss as fuel for reconstruction and growth. On Metallica Prime, the little girl who had stood defiant before the Titan became a leader among the survivors, her hatred transformed into determination to build something better from the ruins of the old order. The Chaos Gods stirred in their dimensional prisons, feeling the shift in the galaxy's spiritual balance. Their power was diminished but not broken, their influence reduced but not eliminated. In the Eye of Terror, Abaddon began planning new campaigns, aware that the Long War had entered a different phase. The age of pure chaos was ending, but perhaps that meant the age of controlled change could begin. On distant Forge worlds, Magos Domini studied the crystalline formations left behind by Thanos' transformation, seeking to understand the mathematical principles that had briefly imposed order upon chaos itself. Some of their findings would be declared heretical and sealed away in the deepest vaults. Others would form the foundation for new technologies that would reshape humanity's understanding of reality. The Eldar Farseers, those who had survived the reality storms that accompanied Thanos' arrival, found their prophecies altered in subtle ways. The paths of fate that had once led inevitably to extinction now showed glimpses of other possibilities. The galaxy was still doomed, still racing toward an ending written in blood and fire, but perhaps that ending was no longer inevitable. Perhaps there was room for hope after all.